Welcome to Overtime with Coach Blue and Athletic Director Marissa.
Hello.
From Team Addict to Athlete, we are a nonprofit program helping people overcome addictions through health and recreation. Rather than just hanging around talking about the sad stuff, we get out and move. Movement equals healing. And today being Valentine's Day, we're going to talk a little bit about relationships and some of those building blocks that I think is required in order to have a good, healthy, strong relationship.
Absolutely.
But before we get kicking off, let's jump into the website, addicttoathlete.org. You'll find all of our content, backlog podcast information on the team, how to become a certified coach, how to get active in our upcoming events like our No One Left Behind half marathon in June.
June 15th.
It's going to be great. This is
Spanish Fork, Utah.
This is a team of 3 or more people that you run together with, kind of representing that no one finishes this stuff alone, and got to be within 15 feet of them the whole time. And it's kind of a great way to introduce some of those folks that are a little bit apprehensive and nervous to jump into the world of half marathon.
And that's the point of recovery, is we can't do it alone. So that's the goal of this race. We start together, finish together.
Absolutely. And our September proxy run for National Recovery Month is open for registration on addicttoathlete.org.
In person in Utah, but also a virtual option. And that's how we celebrate Recovery Month. And soonest coming up, we have another new race that we just opened for our brand new San Lucie chapter of Addict to Athlete in Southern Arizona. On the Tohono O'odham tribe reservation. Mm-hmm. They are doing a run on April 15th, and there is a virtual option to help raise funds for the Native American communities and those who really struggle with addiction and mental health down in that reservation. So It's a great, great cause. All of the information is on our website, addicttoathlete.org. You can go into races and get registered for any of those and have shirts shipped to you. And we'd love to have you join us at any one of these races.
That's going to be a neat one too, because it's going to go benefit those folks down there that are needing some support. So jump on the website. You'll see all the connections and links underneath our events tab. So go check it out. Well, happy Valentine's Day, Marissa.
Thank you.
Yeah, today's that day of love, and we thought what better way to celebrate than to share with you, the listeners and the viewers at home, a little bit about the tendencies of relationship building. As a mental health therapist and addictions counselor, and Marissa being a certified recreational therapist, we've done our share of processing raw emotion, right?
A little bit.
Man.
I mean,
we're
coming up on 24 years married. And
I always joke that our kids, they get therapy 24/7. I mean, with a rec therapist and a therapist as parents, I can imagine the stories they're going to be able to tell. Yeah. But they're all very well adjusted kids.
We have good kids.
Sometimes they surprise me with some of the stuff they bring to the table, but
pretty lucky.
When I was going through school, there was a professor that taught this principle, and I really enjoyed it. And he talked about these stages of love, and what better way to produce maybe this part of our podcast through explaining to you, the listener and viewer, what the stages of love are. And I think everyone goes through these. Everyone goes through them. And that's kind of the interesting aspect of this, is that you may find yourself in one of these paradigms, and I'm going to teach you how to move forward through them so you don't get caught in one that's maybe not as beneficial as the other stages, right?
Yeah.
The initial stage of attraction, the falling in love stage, think about that being number one, falling in love. Yeah. That is the best stage.
That's one I think everyone knows and understands pretty well.
Absolutely. That stage is when you find that special someone. You're on the phone with them all day. Back in the olden days when we had that cord that was attached to the phone in the wall, and had that really long phone cord, right?
Yep.
You'd be spending hours and hours and hours on the phone with the person that you're falling in love with. You could talk hours about nothing. You just want to spend as much time with them. It's almost like temporary insanity, really.
Yeah.
Right?
My mom used to call it Twitter patient.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the great thing about that is you feel that raw sense of love. Like, I am falling deeply, madly in love with this person.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that is it can last for weeks, months, years even. But eventually the newness is going to wear off and you will slide into stage 2. And stage 2 is where most people get nervous, Marissa. Stage 2 boils down to falling out of love.
Yeah.
Like, well, wait a minute. So we fall in love, and then eventually we have to cross the threshold of stage 2, which is falling out of love.
Why would you do that if you're in a relationship, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens is that's when the masks start coming off. That's when things start kind of getting a little real. That's when you start realizing that, oh my gosh, like, I'm falling in love with this person, but this dude's got $300,000 in debts, credit cards, and student loans, or I didn't know that there was an issue here with addictions, or I didn't know that the way that he treats his family is not so kosher.
Some of
whatever.
The skeletons in each other's closets. You start seeing maybe some of the extra hidden baggage that they've had, which, again, everybody has it. It doesn't matter who you are. Everybody comes with skeletons. Everybody comes with baggage. So it's learning to be able to identify some of those things. But yeah, when you do, things start changing. Maybe that intense love and admiration you have for each other starts slipping and falling, and you start questioning, what am I doing?
Well, let's look at it through the lenses of our relationship, because there's no one else here that we can pick on. When we
can pick on us
when we fell in love, we fell pretty deep, and it was awesome, and it felt great. But Coach Blue here, 4 years ago, I had a few skeletons in my closet I didn't want anyone to know. And it's from histories of addictions and poverty as a child. All these things that kind of built up that got me behind this protective barrier, this wall that I didn't let anybody in. And when we started advancing in our relationship, and that falling in love was very present, when the wall started to come down and the heart began to be exposed and the realness of the situation started to kind of take place and the mask came off, that falling out of love stage was kind of brutal for us, because there were secrets a friend of ours had to let you know, like, hey, Blue kind of put out there he has all these accolades and all these successes, and he really doesn't.
He's not
really who he says he is.
He was.
Yeah, and my aspect of all this was being clean and sober for that long was kind of hiding from the inevitable truth, which is I didn't have a lot going for me, but I put up a good front.
Yeah.
Because I never thought we'd cross that next threshold. I always thought, well, once we fall in love, it's game over. That's all I learned.
That's all you'd experienced,
So the falling on a love stage, you guys, it can happen for months, days, weeks, years, or lifetimes. I remember my grandparents having the situation by which they had different bedrooms.
Yeah.
And the joke was, well, grandpa snores and, whatever. But really, they didn't like each other towards the end there.
And I think there were a lot of families that lived that way back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, they wouldn't get divorced. They'd
stay together
and just become kind of roommates. Right?
Yeah, that World War II generation. And if you look at this through the dynamics of family circles and cycles, right? Mm-hmm. Because they were sticking it together because that's what you do through thick and thin and through domestic abuse or not, right?
Yeah.
The thing that's sad about that is their kids, our parents, saw that and thought that was normal. And so when the boomer generation starts coming out and starts having Generation X, all of a sudden we start seeing that there's a lot of emotional detachment.
Well, and it was also that they just didn't talk about anything. They just swept everything under the rug, and you just keep moving forward, which for some people that seemed to work, at least on the surface, that seemed to work. But most people do need to have some connection and understanding and maybe some discussion on what it is and being able to have some emotional intelligence. And that didn't happen with those previous generations.
No, the emotional intelligence was absolutely behind lock and key back then.
Yeah.
So falling on a love stage kind of happens when the masks are off, when all that's kind of exposed, and you have a choice. You get to make a choice. Do I stay or do I go? The old song, right?
Yeah.
Do I stay or do I
go now?
Yeah, exactly. and that's the thing is there really still is love there, but you're falling out of it. Mm-hmm. And, my mother would be the one that when she'd fall out of love, she'd pack us all up and leave. I mean, married and divorced numerous times.
Got married first at 14 years
14 years old.
And
thought she knew what love was.
About 6 marriages or so.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't even imagine a 14-year-old trying to establish a relationship, let alone like a family system. Like it's bizarre, a child having children. But that was the key, right? So in my world, I thought that was the only 2 stages that existed, the falling in and falling out.
Yeah.
But there's a third stage.
Yeah.
And the third stage is absolutely awesome and it's beautiful. And for all you listeners and viewers, I really want you to take heed to this. If you can get through the second stage and you can see the mask and you can still love the person behind it.
And start talking about it and working through and getting to know the real person, the things that they used to, were trying to hide.
Absolutely. If you can get through that stage and you can own your own and you can grow and you can have that growth mindset, you level yourself into stage 3, which is learning how to love that person, but learning how to be loved by that person. Those are 2 very different streets, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. And it's very difficult to understand, mostly if you've grown up in trauma or kind of a misunderstanding of even being able to identify and know what love is. What does it feel like? Often it's easy for people to love someone else, but to be able to accept love in return, but also love yourself.
Yeah.
That's a huge step.
So take it into perspective, and I'll try my best to dissect the relationship that Marissa and I have. And when I learned how to love her, I learned how to love her for her, not for what I was taught by my examples, meaning like, mum's the word, keep your mouth shut, hide everything because you don't want turmoil, because at the first sign of any kind of disengagement, then it's over.
Yeah.
And so Marissa appreciated this thing called honesty, go figure, right?
Pretty strong.
And she wanted to know kind of what made my heart beat, the rhythm by which it was beating. She wanted to know kind of the why behind some of the follies that I'd inflicted myself with.
Yeah.
And you allowed me to be myself, which in turn, I had to then let you in which was another thing. I needed to learn how to be loved by you. I remember the first time I got sick in our relationship, and I don't know if we were still dating, if we were married. I think we were married, and you had kind of like stayed back from work a little bit. You went in late, you got me all set up, and I remember you were like caretaking me a little bit, like you were like providing this thing called empathy and service. And I'm like, what are you doing? Because in my house, no one wanted to touch anybody that was sick because you'll get me sick, and I'm still kind of like that.
You're still very much
old habits are hard to break. But I remember thinking like, holy crap, like she loves me with all the good and for all the bad, she's choosing in. Me allowing her in, learn how to let her love me. That sounds so weird, but that's so important.
Yeah.
And they're different, right?
Yeah. And not just, oh, don't worry about it, I'm fine. And kind of, how often are you in relationships where people kind of push you away like that? They want you to love them, but then when you do, they're just like, I'm not worth it. Don't, I know you love me, whatever, go to work. But just being able to let somebody else serve and love you.
Absolutely. And before we get into these building blocks, I think it's safe to say this. So if you understand the stages of love, falling in love, falling out of love, learning how to love and learning how to be loved, you got to take a little bit of a pulse and see where your relationship is at. And I love this principle taught to me by Dr. Paul Jenkins in Live on Purpose. And he sets it up kind of this way, Marissa, and I love this analogy. He says, let's say that you're rolling into Las Vegas, right? Super Bowl just went down. Everyone's down there gambling. Yeah. And maybe you put some money down on whatever team you wanted to win, and they did, and you're a high roller. So you walk into your favorite casino, and you sit down, you put $100 of currency, $100 bill into a machine. You pull the handle, all the bells, all the whistles, and out comes
nothing.
$0. You're like, no problem. High roller here. No sweat. So you put another $100 in, you pull the handle, all the bells, all the whistles, out comes $0. Third time's a charm. So you put the third $100 bill in, you pull the handle, bells and whistles, out comes $0. No matter how much you feed this machine, these $100 bills, and you've got a thick stack because you're a high roller, nothing comes out. Like, how long would you want to be there, right?
Yeah.
But there are no other machines open right now. So you're just feeding this machine, pulling it, nothing's happening. Well, let's say eventually the machine next to you gets open. So you slide over there. You're like, the heck with this one.
Yeah.
You put the $100 in this machine. You pull the handle, all the bells, all the whistles, out comes $100. Hey, now we're talking. Put 100 in, pull the handle, 100 out. You're like, wait a minute. This is better than the first one.
Yeah.
But I'm still not getting a huge return on this, right? I'm not getting a big return. So if you're putting $100 of currency in, pulling the handle, out comes $100, maybe you're looking at it and thinking, this is the same $100 bill.
Over and over.
And who knows how long you're there? Maybe you're there for hours, days, months, years. But then you slide over to the third machine. It finally becomes open. You slide over there. You put the $100 bill in this machine, pull the handle, out comes $200.
Yeah.
Now we're talking. So you take that $200, you put that $200 in, you pull the handle, out comes $400.
Yeah. We
See
can
what I'm
double
saying?
our
You're like,
money there.
wait a minute. Every time I invest in this machine, I get that back. And then you can take that winning and invest it back in. Mm-hmm. Dr. Paul describes the relationships that same way. He's like, what if you're putting $100 of emotional currency into your spouse, your partner,
family member,
and you're getting nothing in return? No matter how much you give, you're not getting anything in return. Yeah. But you're really hoping that this might be the time that you hit the jackpot, and so you keep doing it.
So you stay there because it's got to pay out some point, right? If you put in all that work, it's going to pay out.
It's bursting at the seams. You're like, how can this not pay out?
Yeah.
But it just doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And then that number two machine, that even Stevens kind of mindset where you put in and what you get out, like there is no gain. It's just that classic flat.
Yeah. It's good though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's good.
Well,
that's
it's better than one.
Number one.
Absolutely.
Right?
But what about machine number three, relationship number three? You invest $100 of emotional currency into this person and they double down and give it back to you.
Yeah.
So you take that winnings and then you give them an increase and then they give you an increase. And pretty soon you're building this empire of emotional currency. That's the one you want. And that's not always easy to do because again, there are times when if you're okay with playing the game and you enjoy the bells and the whistles and that's all you want, then maybe one or two relationship, box number one, box number two, maybe that might be where you want to be. But I don't think so.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you're in recovery, when you're coming out of any kind of traumatic issue or things of that nature, there are certain building blocks that will help you get to that stage three, learning how to love, learning how to be loved, and become that machine, that box number three person where you can give more than you've been given and you can increase and you can have that increase of exchange.
Yeah.
Right?
Because who doesn't want that, right? But again, as you're lifted up by being able to get more in return, you're able to put more back into that relationship. And that's the whole point, is to be able to then always improving, you're always increasing.
But we see this frequently, right? If you're giving $100 of your emotional currency to your spouse or partner and they're giving nothing in return, how long will you continue to invest in that, right?
Yeah.
So these building blocks are kind of the gears that make a relationship functional. And the first one you've got to have on the foundational level is trust, right? It is essential for a relationship to have trust. It's the very first thing we learn in child development. Erickson talks about it in his child development theory. The very first thing we learn from infancy to age 1,
trust versus mistrust.
Trust versus mistrust. The very first principle we learn is how to trust someone or learn to mistrust that someone.
As well as ourselves,
Of
being
course.
able to trust your instincts, or do you mistrust your instincts because you worked on something, you went for something, and then it didn't pay back?
Think about that on an infant level, right? The infant level, trust versus mistrust. How can an infant even comprehend that? Well, they're not articulating it, but they're experiencing what it is. Meaning every time a baby cries, an infant, 0 to 1, it's one or two things. A, they're hungry. B, they're dirty. They need a diaper change. And sometimes that happens simultaneously.
Yeah.
So the baby starts crying.
Uncomfortable somehow. Yeah.
Baby's like, oh, this pit in my stomach kind of hurts. What is this? It doesn't understand that she's hungry or he's hungry.
So they cry.
Baby cries. This amazing person comes in. And let's be honest, guys, it's usually mom that comes in, right?
Huh.
And when we had to divvy out chores, you're like, it's your turn, right? But it's usually mom that comes in. Mom grabs the baby, feeds the baby, burps the baby. Baby's stomach feels good, changes the diaper, but the baby's like, man, this feels great, puts it down in.
Yeah.
And the baby learns real quick. Every time I have this uncomfortable feeling or every time I have this this hole in my stomach, when I cry, when I talk, right? When I cry, this amazing person comes in and fixes it.
Yeah.
So it learns to trust. Ooh, I have this little tummy ache.
Trust themselves and their own internal messaging, and then to trust mom, dad, a caregiver to be able to respond when you don't feel well.
So think about that. How amazing is that? The baby's starting to understand that when I have these feelings, I cry, they come in.
Yeah.
But what happens if there's an issue and the parents don't come because there's distractions? Maybe there's some abandonment. Maybe there's some DV stuff. Maybe there's, substance abuse, whatever that distracts or takes away that primary caregiver to render that baby's needs. After a while, the baby will get louder and louder and louder to the point where it just starts to be quiet. It realizes no matter how much energy it puts into this feeling and doesn't understand where it comes from, nothing's coming to help it. It's sporadic at best. And the baby begins to mistrust those things.
Yeah. You know what's interesting now that you say that? I don't know if I've ever thought of this before, but I think infants learn to, sadly, give up on that relationship quicker than adults do.
100%.
They learn to just be quiet and be done. They're not going to do it. And then adults, there's so many people I know that just continue to push relationships that are not paying them back. They continue to put themselves in situations that they're not being respected.
Yeah.
Way more than an infant.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
so
does
sad.
make sense. So trust being the essential foundation of a relationship building block would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It's the positive energy. It's that connection of like, I can trust you. I know that if I need you, you're here. That when we're not together, we're still together. This is where relationships that start to fade away into extramarital affairs or cheating, so to speak. This is why these are so devastating, is because that's the foundation of everything, is that trust. And I've worked with tons of folks that have had situational issues by which their spouse or partners become unfaithful and have broken that bond of trust, and those boundaries are crossed, and that emotional intimacy is not able to take hold again. And it is the absolute sword to the heart and the end all be all in relationships.
Because other things come up and it's easy to be distracted that maybe those are the other problems and those are the real problems. But if you really dig down deep, the core issue is usually going to be some kind of trust.
Absolutely. So that's the foundational level. We start building on this with commitment. Now, I remember you giving a talk not too long ago, maybe a couple of years ago, on commitment and what commitment truly is. Being all in, right? Not being like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but committed to the relationship, the marriage, the family. Once trust is established, you can then start to focus on that commitment to what is.
Well, and that commitment is going to also circle back and increase that trust, Like
Absolutely.
if you know that you and your spouse are committed to fully engage your time, your energy, your attention, it's much easier to go, okay, yeah, they are following through, they are following up, and things are going better. You usually have that commitment for those that you want to be around you long term. Those ones you're wanting to put more into.
Absolutely. Commitment is reserved for those who have proven that they are capable
Yeah.
of sticking around, right?
Yeah.
Meaning that they're in it for the long haul. And through thick or through thin, I remember when my mother was getting married to husband number 7 or 6 or something. I remember that when we were in attendance, they said the commitment level of this. And it was kind of funny because I'm thinking she's never really been fully committed to anything. So good luck with that. That means all in. That means through thick, through thin, through health, through sickness, through better, through worse,
That's
right?
the loyalty piece. And again, your mom was really loyal to friends. She had some lifelong friends, but yeah, as a more of a relationship and intimacy and partner, that was more of a struggle.
So when you're thinking commitment, you are thinking loyalty. You're thinking, I'm going to be a person of my word. I'm going to show up. This is the one thing that I thought when I was asking your parents permission for marriage, that I thought, this is a big deal. Shouldn't be taken lightly. Yeah. This is me saying, I'm now ready to step in and take the place of what you guys had provided for all these years. And really, it wasn't me doing all the work. It was me saying, give me a chance. I want to be part of this family. But that loyalty, I think, is huge. And that's something that, again, goes hand in hand with trust. Third building block to a great relationship is intimacy. Yeah. Specifically, the emotional intimacy. This is feeling comfortable in silence, right? Comfortable silence. This is being able to love that person and have those intimate moments of connectivity. This means that you're comfortable enough to share all the aspects of who you are.
Yeah, like when we talk about that falling out of love, that's when those masks come off and you finding the, hidden skeletons in the closet. That's intimacy, is where you start to be able to be comfortable to share those things that maybe you've kept away from the world or kept out of other relationships and been afraid to show. You've got to get to the point where you're okay and you feel loved enough to share those things without being judged or without being ridiculed by sharing that.
See, if you think about it too, I love that you said that you're comfortable enough of sharing the aspects of you with that person. Mm-hmm. Each of us have these 3 kind of personalities. We have the public persona, the public thing that we share to all the public. It's what you guys are seeing right now, the public parts of Marissa and I, right? And that's different than the second one, which is the private parts, which is the person we are outside of our jobs and outside of the spotlight and, our professions and jobs. It's the things that we hold sacred away from public view. Yeah. But then there's the third side, and that's the secret self, right? Mm-hmm. And that's stuff that we don't share with anybody, that maybe I even keep from you. Mm-hmm. And the goal here is to get less of the secret self and more of the private self so that you don't have to have any of them skeletons in the closet. But you have to understand that all of us carry those 3 personas, the public, the private, and the secret. And those secrets are what can devastate the relationship, right? And so you've got to be in tune with each other. So the emotional intimacy building block to make a great marriage, a great relationship, a great connection is so important.
It's being vulnerable and being willing to talk about and open up and show maybe some of our weaknesses and, maybe the things that we liked least about ourselves, to be able to trust the other person that you can share that and be able to work through and talk about some of that. A lot of courage.
The 4th block here is respect, which literally means to look back, to respect enough of yourself, enough with the relationship, enough with the connection, the system, to have enough respect in a relationship to know that I'm not going to go out and do foolish things with our finances. The respect level has to be there.
So that's going to have to be that you take some time to be able to see from somebody else's different perspective. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can have a lot of respect for other people if you're not able to open up your mind and being able to understand, have some empathy and having some perspective shifts that maybe your view and your understanding of life or your 40-day work week, which was really hard, may not be as hard as or harder than, who knows, the spouse maybe that's home or whatever, just that you're able to see from somebody else's point of view.
I'll seriously never forget the time that I came home from work, again, counselor, therapist, dealing with all the emotions of clients and things of that nature. And you were like, you handed me the kids, your turn. And I so desperately wanted to say, but I've already had it, And I really wanted to pull that card, but I knew I couldn't because as I was looking around, I realized that you had a heck of a day as well.
Yeah.
And so it was that respect of the what was. We're in this together. It's a big part of a relationship, isn't it?
Sure.
Communication, another building block to a great relationship. This is the core reason most of us have relationships that fall apart. It's not finances. It's not all the other stuff. It's a breakdown in the fundamentals of core communication.
Yeah, because that's going to be how you build, understand the trust, future steps we just said.
Yeah.
The intimacy, being able to be vulnerable. You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to talk through the things that you're afraid of, the things that make you angry, and being able to do things in a respectful way. They all go backwards from this communication.
But you have to understand that this is worthy of its own episode, and we'll probably do it again because we talk a lot about communication in Addict to Athlete. I do it in my private practice as well. Now, here's the deal, right? Most of us have an idea on how to communicate, but we stink at it.
Yeah.
We really do. And typically what happens whenever there's any kind of turbulence in a relationship is that we go to what's called control talk. The control talk mode is an interesting modality. It has two subcategories, fight talk or spite talk.
Yeah.
So this is when you come home and you've got that 40-hour work week, and the first thing you do when you walk in is, man, after 40 hours of work, I would have thought maybe the house would have been put together a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's a fight statement, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe a spite statement would be, well, we go to your sister's house and she's got just as many kids as you do. How come, our house doesn't look like hers?
Yeah.
Well, automatically, there's steam building up. That's called reactively listening, meaning that you're reacting to what they're saying because
they're inviting
they're trying
you
to fight you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like I said, they're trying to poke you and poke you and poke you and spite talk you until you pop and explode. And then they can say, well, hey, I'm just asking some questions. Why are you getting so upset?
Yeah. Why are you so defensive?
Then you feel like the aggressor.
Done something wrong.
Absolutely. So you have to understand what degree of communication you're in. Whenever you start getting upset in a conversation, you're reactively listening, which means that person's control talking you. The easiest way to get out of this is to start reflectively listen. And that means that you move into what's called search talk.
Well, and some of it may be setting some boundaries too. It's going to be
100%.
You keeping your voice calm. You're maybe even bringing your voice down a few decibels from just regular talking. So then it's even quieter.
Yeah.
To make your point heard.
The horse
because
whisperer,
that's going to show that you are in control, and that usually will bring them down to match your tone.
Yeah. So I can understand that you might be disappointed that the house looks this way. It's been really challenging here today. We've had 5 blowout diapers. I've been on the phone with the doctor. So I can understand why you're frustrated, but can you help me understand? Or can you help understand like where I'm coming from? Because I'm going to need a little support here too. Like I'm worried or I'm feeling overwhelmed.
They're still fighting. Then you're like, I don't respond to someone talking to me in that volume.
That's straight talk.
I won't respond.
That's straight talk.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've had to have these conversations. I remember when I would spend a lot of time in my hobbies and going out cycling every Saturday morning until, leave at 6 in the morning, come back at 2 in the afternoon. You're like, need a little help here, sir.
Finally a day off.
Yeah.
Like some
and
engagement.
The way you delivered that was eloquent. You're like, I understand that this is good for you, but I need some help here. And so communication is so important. And maybe we will in the future do another block lesson on communication because it is so important. It's the reason why relationships fall apart.
Yeah. And it's often, maybe you need to take a break before you start. If you can't go into a conversation without having that spite talk, without having that, reactively listening, maybe you need a break before you even, hey, we need to discuss this, but I'm too heated right now. This needs to come in a little bit later where I can think more clearly and that we can address the real issues.
It's the classic pass-through of anger as a secondary emotion. So when you start getting angry and you're using control talk or fight talk, right? When you're doing that, there's something behind that. And it's maybe you're disappointed. Maybe, you're hurt. Maybe you're depressed.
You're embarrassed.
You're embarrassed. Yeah. And that comes out in anger. So whenever you're in fight talk, you can't get down to the core anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and when you are in fight talk, when you're angry, part of being angry is the response of that fight, flight, or fawn response.
Yep.
And when you do that, your blood in your vascular system, it leaves your brain.
It does.
It goes to the
extremities.
Your extremities so that you can do what you need to get away. So there's no way that you can engage in a really thoughtful, understanding conversation when you don't have blood in your brain to be able to think clearly.
That's why the old comment of never go to bed angry is false advice.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you need that deep decompression, time to kind of
down.
calm down. There's been so many times when I thought I've had the last word in an amazing argument and I've walked away, give them the good day, sir, and I walk away.
Yeah.
And then have an amazing comeback, like, oh man, I wish I would have said that. Why? Because your blood starts to return back to the brain and it can function properly.
Thinking clearly.
Yeah, so you don't need to solve it right now, but communication deserves its own kind of track, but it is a key building block in a relationship. We're going to kind of cruise through these. I know we're getting a little bit long-winded, but I really do think that forgiveness is a huge building block, because when your partner or your spouse does something that really upsets you, you've got to be willing to forgive them. Yeah. And it may take time, and I'll be honest with you, there are some unforgivable things. Yeah. Meaning like we can move from this, but like this is going to take a long time. Yeah. And it might have to be something more than just an apology. Sometimes time has to, be a part of it to heal. Yeah. But it starts with you forgiving yourself first and foremost, and then moving that through your partner. If you have a heart of forgiveness, when appropriate, because again, I'm a firm believer, and there are people that hate me saying this, but I'll say it to everyone who's listening and watching. It is a privilege to have a relationship with you. It is not a right. Yeah. And if forgiveness is going to be part of that by which you surrender that mindset, then they don't deserve it. Now, that sounds kind of funny. But forgiveness is a huge part of this. And sometimes you might not be able to forgive the person, but you've got to forgive yourself. And I think that's kind of interesting. Forgiveness is so universally personal. Again, it's one of these, contributions
hard to teach.
Yeah. That we could probably do a whole podcast on. But it's super important. We're going to jump down to this last one. And this is why I think it's important, okay? Yeah. When you're in that third stage of learning how to love and learning how to be loved, you have to have a sense of autonomy. Yes. That relationship that you're involved with, I don't care if it's husband, wife, partner, I don't care what it is. You still have to have your autonomy. You have to be able to have
you have to be able to have things that you enjoy, time alone, separation, that you are still part of a relationship, but you have something on your own. You just had this conversation with our teenage daughter.
Absolutely.
Who's trying to navigate relationships and understand that first falling in love stage. You want to be everything and everywhere and every second around and part of that person's life because it feels so good.
It does.
But if you do that too much, you lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, it's very hard to be in a relationship, because relationships are about two people together and apart. And you have to be able to have your independence.
So I taught her this principle, right? She's graduating senior in high school. She's got boyfriend. She's got these goals of going to college and doing this medical thing. And I don't want to get too close, but I really am attracted to this person.
But then I'm going to move away in the fall.
And I'm thinking, man, if you had only an idea what deeper relationships look like, right? Yeah. But you look at it this way. If you think of two circles, right? And if you bring those two circles together ever so slightly, there's that little part in the middle that overlaps. Yeah. That little part in the middle is your relationship. But you still have to have some autonomy that is your own space.
These aren't the two circles on top of each other.
No, if they're eclipsing each other, then it's too close.
It's too much.
If you're too far apart, that's falling out of love, and you're going to get to the point of no return one day.
Finding that balance where you can be together, have parts that overlap. Yeah.
There's so many aspects to this, but what Merce and I wanted to really just give to you guys today is a little bit of advice on how to strengthen, rebuild, or even develop a relationship. We have lots of podcasts on this subject about relationship building, about what happens through addiction recovery, what happens through mental health turbulence, all that kind of stuff. All of it can be found on addict2athlete.org underneath our podcasts and resources.
Yep, and go to our Libsyn site. It has all of our podcasts. You can go to the search bar and even search certain words and find some tags.
Absolutely. Yep. We talk about these things every Wednesday to do our little live show here. If you got questions, feel free to email us, blue@addict2athlete.org or marissa@addict2athlete.org. Yep. Again, the best is to find the website. It's a one-stop shop for everything.
Yeah. Submit questions by email if you want us to address a topic next Wednesday. We'd love to bring it here to the mic.
Absolutely. So till next time, athletes and viewers out there, do your best to turn your mess into your message.